Hey everybody, today I'm going to show you the basics of how to frame a wall. So stay tuned and check it out. Alright, so today we're going to continue this wall all the way across here until it hits the exterior wall right here. So you can kind of see the blue chalk line. I've lined up the laser line on the other side. So we're going to follow that across here, and it's going to end up being flush with the rest of this wall, and then we'll also frame in a door somewhere around here. So let's get after it. Alright, so the first thing to do is cut our plates to size. So we'll line some up on the floor. Alright, so we got 8 feet here, another 8-footer, but it's gonna have to get cut off a little bit. So make sure that's tight. Alright, and we can just come down here and make a mark. So that's where we gotta cut that one. Alright, so that fits in there nice and tight. Now we got our bottom plates. So these are green plates, so that's pressure treated. You're gonna want pressure treated anytime that you have a piece of wood in contact with either the concrete ground or the concrete wall. So that just prevents against mold in the future. So now that we got our bottom plates down, I'm going to put some top plates on it, and that can just be regular 2x4s, and we'll cut those to length. Alright, so you can see here I got my plates lined up on the ground, and the reason I didn't cut these two to the same length quite yet is because that's why. The green sheets are just a little bit longer than the normal 2x4s for some reason. So I like to cut them separately, that way I can get an accurate cut, and we'll mark this one out here. And to be honest, this one's actually going to be cut back even more a little bit later, because I'm going to line up on the side of this. I'm not going to go all the way to here, but I'll show you that later. So now that we got our top and bottom plates cut to length, we can start laying out the stud locations. Alright, so just a few tools that you'll need: speed square, tape measure, and a pencil. Alright, so to start off, we always put a stud on the end. So mark there, because this stud, we'll use that to nail through to this existing wall right here. So there's always going to be a stud on the end. Alright, and take your tape measure and just stretch it out a little bit. Knock it down. Alright, and our first mark is always going to be on 15 1/4. So make a mark right there, and then we're going to mark ahead, which means we're going to mark on the side that we're moving towards. So in this case, we're moving this way, so we're going to put an X on the right side. That just tells us that this is the side of this mark that the stud is going to be located on. So we're going to have a stud here, right there. So that's the placement of our stud. All right, so first mark, 15 1/4. Now take the end of your tape measure and move it down till it's right on that 15 1/4 mark. And what that does is it just makes it a little bit more dummy proof for the rest of the wall. So now with the end of the tape on the 15 1/4 mark, we can start marking out the rest of the wall. All right, and we're gonna mark every 16. So 16, mark ahead. 32, mark ahead. 48, mark ahead. 64, mark ahead. 80, mark ahead. 96, ahead. 112, ahead. 128, ahead. 144, ahead. And now we're at the end, so we'll put a stud right there. Alright, so now that we got our stud locations marked out for the most part, I'm going to start with this first 8-foot section of wall, just because I'm doing this by myself, and to lift this whole 14-ish feet of wall up at one time and maneuver around some obstacles, the ductwork and the ceiling, it's just going to be a little bit challenging. So I'm just going to do this 8-foot section first, and then I'll come back and catch the remaining like 6 feet over there. So we marked out our 16s on this top plate here. Now we're just going to transfer those marks up to the green plate. So you got one on the end always, and mark ahead, And all I'm doing, like I said, is transferring the marks that we just made to the green plate. All right, so I just transferred this mark up to the green plate just by putting the square on there and drawing a line. And then mark ahead, mark on the same side that you were before. All right, so as you can see, I'm kind of on the edge of the bottom of this floor joist. This green laser line is right where the face of my wall is going to be. So anytime that you are in between where your wall, the top of your wall lands in between the floor joist like this, going parallel with it, you're going to want to add some blocking up here. So let me show you what that looks like. So if we come over here to this wall, this is what I'm talking about. So these blocks, every couple feet, just cut them to size, screw them in there, and then now you have somewhere to nail your top plate up to. That's just gonna keep the top of the wall right in place. So I'm gonna cut a couple of those, put them in place, and then we can get the height for our wall. All right, so just measure in between the floor joists in a couple locations just to make sure that it's pretty consistent. So we got 13¼ right there. Yeah, 13¼ 13¼ All right, so I'm gonna cut probably about 4, maybe 5 of those. And then I'm just gonna start a couple screws in the pieces of wood, just on the ground. It's a little bit easier. All right, just like that, and we can install it in the ceiling. All right, so what we just did there is we added some blocking in there, just so that we have something to tie the top of the wall into. And this is just flush with the bottom of the floor joist. All right, so we're gonna be working on this section of wall right here. And in order to get the height of all these studs that we need to cut, I like to make it dummy proof. So that way, if I'm not thinking correctly that day, what have you, I know that these measurements are gonna be what I need to cut. So we're gonna take our plates and stack them on top of each other like that. That way, I can take my tape measure, set it right on top of here, measure up to the underside of the floor joist, and that's the dimension I need to cut. I don't have to measure from the floor to the underside of the joist and then subtract 3, nothing like that. Just from the top of this plate to the underside of the floor joist, maybe subtract about 1/8 of an inch, and that's your cut. All right, so we got our studs stacked. Now let's just take a dimension of that. So from the top of the stacked studs, the top of the stacked plates, up to the bottom of the floor joist. And we're right at 90½ inches. So 90½ inches is tight, but the way I build these walls, I build them flat on the floor and then I tip them up into place. So I like to subtract about 1/8 of an inch off of that dimension. So we're 90½, let's go 90�3/8. And I just like to double check that a little bit along the wall, just on a few different places, make sure it's pretty consistent. 90½. Yeah, looks pretty consistent along this wall. So I'm gonna, let's put this back down. I can count my studs, so I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 studs at 90�3/8 of an inch. All right, so now I've got all my studs cut to length, and now I can just start building the wall. So take your green treat, make sure that you don't like switch this end for end or anything like that. Just take it like that, bring it straight back, and put it on the edge. Same thing, just tip this up where it is, and just leave it like that for right now. What I'm using is the DeWalt, it's the battery operated one, like that. All right, nails go on the top here. It's a 21 degree. I think they make a 30 degree as well, but I just like this because then I don't have to run a compressor and a cord. It's just all right here what I need. So if you guys are interested in that, not sponsored by them or anything. I just think it's a pretty decent nail gun. So I'll leave a link for this down below. All right, what you're gonna do is take your studs, line them up. This first one's just gonna be flush with the end of the sill plate. So once it's flush, also make sure when you're nailing into here, you want the boards to be straight and plumb and square with each other, but right before you nail, make sure to move your hands out of the way. Just in case a nail would go awry and maybe it would come up through the top, you don't want to get your hand. That would be a bad day. So let's go ahead and nail this. All right. So there's the first one. Let me get a closer shot on this next one. So sometimes the pencil marks can be a little bit tougher to read on the green treated pieces of wood, but here's our line right here, and then we marked ahead. So our X is on this side of the line. So our stud is going to be on that side of the line as well. So we line it up there and throw a few nails in it. All right, there we go. And just keep moving down. Also, another thing when you are shooting these nails, the thing that keeps them together is this little plastic strip in there. When you shoot a nail off, these go flying everywhere. So make sure you're wearing some safety glasses as well. All right, and so for this last one, I'm not gonna nail it on quite yet. It's just gonna make it, if I did so, it would make it a little bit more difficult to install this next section of wall, because it's gonna come in like this, and then this is going to kind of split the difference, kind of split that seam right there. So I'm gonna install this later and just toenail it in once the wall is stood up in place. All right, so this is the wall that's perpendicular to the new wall that we're gonna stand up right here. So in order to tie the new wall into here, we're gonna need some blocking here. Just because it didn't quite land on this stud or another stud, we're just gonna add some blocking here. Also, that's necessary because the drywaller needs something to rest the drywall against in the corner. So if you don't have anything in the corner, then the drywall could just break off right there. I'll show you what I mean. All right, so there's our marks for the edge of where the new wall is going to come in. So we're going to put a stud right there, and then when our new wall is set in place, there's going to be a stud on the end like that, and now we have something to nail into that corner. Also, on this side, now the drywall can run into that corner and it's fully supported. All right, so back on this side, you can see that the drywall along this face will be supported by this stud, but there's nothing supporting this piece of drywall coming across here. So we're gonna have to add one more in there, and I'm probably just gonna add it like that. You could do it on the edge. I don't know if there's really any advantage either way. So basically, we'll stack two studs like that, and that will give us plenty of meat to attach everything together.
And in general, it's always important to think at least a few steps ahead in the build process. You want to keep in mind the needs of the next tradesperson that's going to be following the current step of work that you're on. Especially when framing, you always want to be thinking about how the drywaller is going to install a sheet along this wall. And in some instances, you're just going to have to provide a couple extra studs, like the step that I'm currently working on.
There we go. We got our blocking installed. Now we can tip this new wall up.
And here I'm just carrying the vapor barrier down to the floor prior to installing this new wall. Alright, so sometimes it's a little bit difficult to pick it up on camera, but you can see that the green laser is right on the edge of that stud right there. So that's
pretty good. I could probably, let's see, probably tap it over right about like that. And now I can start to just barely see it on here. So I'm gonna take my red marker and mark a line right there. Oh, right there. All right, and let's just do that on the top and just barely see the green right there. Could probably come over right there. So again, one man working here, it just makes it a little bit easier. And also, now you guys can see that red marker on there. So I like to work out from the corner. So as you can see, the rest of the green line, it's not quite on that edge. So I'll start in that corner and start securing it, probably secure to that other wall first, and then put some pins on the floor and just work my way down this way, just adjusting where that bottom plate is along the way so it lines up nicely. And then same thing with this top line as well. You can see we're just off a little bit right there. Right there's the green line, and we gotta go to the left just a little bit. Right, so that's in there, attached nicely. Now let's attach it to the floor. All right, so to attach the wall to the floor, there's a few different methods, but the way that I'm gonna do it is I'm gonna use some of these Ramset nails. So this is a Remington Ramset gun, I guess. It's kind of an old school one. You can still pick this up for, I think, about $30, $35. They make a few different types, but this is what I got. And then you'll have these special nails, and then you'll have this load, which is basically some gunpowder, but no projectile. They make a few different strengths of this. I've got the number 4, I believe. Yeah, number 4. And then I'm using 3-inch Ramset nails. So the way you do this, take a nail, load it in the end until this like rubbery plastic thing is in there. All right, and then you're gonna take the shot right there, and you're going to, let's see if I can get a good angle. You're gonna stick it right there. All right, and then you're just gonna close this up. There's 2 lines on the end here, or on the edge. There's that line and that line, and those will need to be lined up for it to shoot. So then you're gonna come over here. This is definitely gonna be loud, so make sure you're wearing both eye protection and ear protection. Before we do that, let me just get the wall in place. Okay, I'm on my red line. All right, so we got the load. So we got the nail in the bottom and the load right here. Close that up. And you're gonna take a hammer and hit the top of this. All right? So you're gonna take a hammer and just hit the top of this. All right, here we go. Just like that. Bring the wall out till it's lined up. And you don't need one of these nails in every space. I usually skip a stud space and then do the next one. All right. All right, so then moving to attach it to the underside of the joist. Again, I'm just going to throw a couple marks up here so it's easier to read it on camera. Again, pull the wall where it needs to be, and then drive a few screws up into the blocks that we placed in there earlier. And if you guys have learned something so far in this video and you feel that I've earned it, go ahead and hit that subscribe button along with that like button. That just helps me grow my channel, and it also gives me some feedback to tell me that either this was a good video or it wasn't. But only do so if you think I've earned it. If I haven't earned it yet, go ahead and continue watching this video and maybe I'll teach you something along the way. Thank you. Alright, so moving on to the other part of the wall, I'm going to let this bottom plate run into this other wall right here, but this top plate I'm actually going to cut short, and I'm going to come off this edge right here, and I'm going to draw a line right there. And then I'm just going to cut that off, because up above there's the beam for the house, the main beam for the house, and I'm going to run this into the side of the beam. Let me show you that. Alright, so there's the bottom corner right there. If we follow that up, here's the main beam of the house, and I'm going to run the top plate right tight along the underside of this ductwork and hit the side of that. I need that extra, as much space as I can for the door opening, so that's why I'm going to cut it short, and actually it's going to be right about back there. So I'm going to cut it short, and so we'll bump into the side of the beam. Alright, so that's going to be cut off right here, and then here's our next stud spacing. So let's draw a line there, connect the two, and I'm going to call from this line over my door opening. So then I want a double stud in the corner. So come back 1.5 inches, put another mark, draw another line, and then I can put another stud there. So I got 1 stud, 2 studs. All right, so here's the inside edge of the rough opening for my door. I'm gonna measure, I want a 36-inch door here, so I'm gonna measure 38 inches. So I have 2 more inches to play with. That allows for the door frame and then a little bit of shimming. So put the end of the ruler right on that edge, come over here, find 38 inches, and make a mark. All right, and I'll bring you over here. All right, so this is the mark that we just made. We'll strike a line, and then this is the door, so we're gonna put our framing on that side. We'll measure 1 more plate, or 1 more stud, so we'll come over another 1.5 inches. And then 1 more stud. So we'll have 2 studs on this side, 2 more studs on that side. And then the rest of this, like here's a mark from earlier. We've already drawn that line up there. And then this is a mark from earlier, but that's within the door opening. So we'll leave it on the top plate, but we're not going to transfer that to the bottom plate because we don't need it there. All right, so we've got our studs all marked out. Now we get to start measuring for some obstacles. So if we look above, we're gonna want to get a measurement from the end of the top plate over to just shy of this gas line, because we're gonna put a top plate in there, and then we're gonna drop down and go underneath the ductwork right there. So let's get some of those measurements. All right, so we're looking at 20.5 inches.
Alright, and here I'm just showing where an extra stud's going to run from the edge of that top plate all the way down to the bottom plate. And right here I'm just getting the dimension for my studs around the door opening. And here I took the tape measure and hooked onto a previously installed stud and measured to the end of the top plate. Then I can hook onto the same stud on the bottom and mark out where that extra stud will fall on the bottom plate. This allows that stud to be straight up and down. And now with the wall tipped up in place, I can attach these 2 studs on the end from the top of the top plate. And finally, I can install this stud that's connecting the 2 separate sections of wall by toe-nailing it in place.
All right, so over in this corner, I attached it to the floor right there. And then this piece didn't come into the side of the beam quite like I thought it would. This ductwork was actually sitting about an inch lower than this piece. And so then it just lowered this whole thing in general. So I added a couple pieces of blocking right there, attached it right there, and then to the existing walls. So this corner is very secure now. And then one more piece of blocking above the door frame, just screwed up from the underside and then attached it by toenail to the floor joist there. So that's all good right there. I hope this video gave you guys a little bit better understanding of how to frame a basement wall. And at the very least, maybe you learned something. Until next time, thanks for watching.